Course studies, course studies, course studies, course studies. Welcome back to the second part of Asch. This is going to be a speedy, hopefully around about 12-minute gallop through findings and conclusions and evaluation of this course study. So, we talked about a baseline study that involved one participant and 8 confederates. And one of the major findings was that in the critical trials, remember those were the trials where all of the confederates gave the same incorrect answer, on 36.8% of those trials, the participants, the real participants, gave the wrong answer, so they agreed with the group. There's variation in that though. 25% of them never gave a wrong answer. Others agreed on nearly every trial. But what that means is that 75% of people gave a wrong answer at least once, which is an important. I'd recommend that as an important piece of quantitative data for your findings. Behaviour tended to be quite constant, and Asch said that of the people who didn't conform, the ones who were independent, they kind of started out on the path. They disagreed from the beginning. They showed confidence in their own judgment, and even though they might have felt a bit doubtful at times, they were able to recover from that, and they really felt a responsibility towards the group and to everyone else to say what they actually saw. However, among the people who did conform, remember that these things that we're saying now are qualitative findings. Asch said that the ones who did go along with everyone else, once they started on that line, they found it very difficult to free themselves from that, so they tended to carry on agreeing with wrong answers. Some said afterwards in the interviews that they believed that they were wrong and everyone else was right. Others said that they didn't want to spoil the results. Some of them suspected that the majority was sheep, and they thought that maybe there was some kind of optical illusion going on. Some also said that they thought that they were deficient in some way, that they weren't as good at doing this task as everyone else. Okay. In terms of the variations, this will be on page 7 of your handout. Make sure you can do the following things. You need to be able to explain the procedures and findings from each variation, and explain how the findings are different from the baseline study. And you can use the information on page 70 of the text to fill in the boxes on page 7 of the handout. Okay, so you need to show that when Asch did a variation, for example, where he varied the size of the majority, the number of people who were in the group, what kind of effect did that have? Or if Asch gave the participant a truthful partner, so one of the group actually told the truth all the way through, how did that affect conformity? Okay. On your sheet there, you'll see that there are a couple of things worth noting. It was the idea that as long as the participant had at least one person to agree with, then they tended to stick with the correct answer. But when the participant found themselves on their own, they tended to go along with the group a bit more. Even when we did one variation where the incorrect line, where there was a massive difference, 7 inches difference between the correct answer and the wrong answer, some people still went along with that. Okay. So in terms of conclusions, then, the key thing is that both from the baseline study and the variations, that there is a strong tendency to conform, even in a situation that is unambiguous. So when there's no doubt. Okay, so that's one important conclusion. The pressure reduced as the size of the group got smaller. Pressure on the individual reduced, but that was only when the majority was 3 or less. So in other words, if once the group, the highest rate of conformity was round about when there was one participant and 3 confederates. Any number higher than that didn't seem to make a massive amount of difference on the level of conformity. The participants were less likely to conform, so there must have been less pressure on the participants if there was a dissenter. A dissenter is someone who argues with the rest of the group. So even if the dissenter was given another incorrect answer, that encouraged the participant not to conform either. So Asch concluded that what's really important is that if the group are going to put pressure on the individual, it's really important that they're unanimous, that they all give the same wrong answer. And he found that when if a confederate started off agreeing with the participant and then changed and agreed with the majority, then that began to affect the level of conformity of the participant too. So, as we say, have a look at the quote from Asch. We're now on, in your handout, we're now on page 8. So listen to it. I'll read this, why not? So, we have found a tendency to conform in our society so strong that reasonably intelligent and well-meaning young people are willing to call white black. And that's a matter of concern. Yet, anyone inclined to draw too pessimistic conclusions from this report would do well to remind himself that the capacities for independence are not to be underestimated. And those who participated in this challenging experiment agreed nearly without exception that independence was preferable to conformity. Have a look, and in the next box there, go back and see what Asch was saying about the kind of things. So the kind of things that help people resist conformity were things like finding allies and seeing other people standing up against the crowd. Okay. So remember, as usual with all of these things, that you need some quantitative findings, from the interviews and the things that Asch did afterwards, and also some firm conclusions. We're saying what Asch believed those findings to mean. Only findings or conclusions, the most you can get is 6 out of 12. Okay, 7 minutes in. Let's have a quick look at the methodology. So it's a lab study. It's a controlled observation, and so you want to be talking about things like in terms of method, that there is a high level of control. The procedures are standardized, which means therefore that Asch's research can be replicated and checked, and it was. There was a lot of replication of Asch's work. However, again, and you need to spell out clearly why that's the case. It's an artificial task in an artificial environment, so people are going to feel nervous or different about being in the lab experiment. So their behaviour is not going to be the same as it would be in the outside world. So we've got an ecological validity issue just because they're not in their natural environment. Also, the task itself is being criticised as being not the kind of thing that we're necessarily faced with in real life. Okay, the reliability issue is quite an interesting one, because if you look on your sheet, we'll see that Larson in 1974 and Perrin and Spencer in 1980, they did similar experiments to Asch and found massively reduced levels of conformity. Quite a lot of people argue that, and you'll see this expression in your textbook, a lot of people argue that Asch's findings were because the study was a child of its time. In the 1950s, when he did the study, America was a very conformist place, and people say that many places in the world are no longer like that. Ask yourself whether there might have been some experimental effects within Asch's study, whether it's possible that he might have communicated anything to the participants when the study was going on. Do you think, and also in terms of validity, was the line comparison task a valid test? If there was a different kind of test of conformity that maybe that's more like real life and more meaningful, maybe we would have got different results. A lot of people say that the task was trivial and that the participants would sit there and think, well, what's the big deal? I call one line longer than another. No one's going to die. Not a massive issue. Okay, I'll let you go on with the rest of the validity ones. There's a volunteer sample. As you will see, or some of the groups have already seen, volunteers are unusual people. If I asked for a volunteering class to help me tidy out my cupboard or do other things, I wouldn't get a massive number of people rushing to help. So volunteers are especially helpful and interested kind of people. So maybe we can't generalize from those kind of people to the whole population. Think about the gender of the participants as well. That's going to be an issue for this. I'm not going to say any more on that one. You can work it out. Ethical issues. We have one participant and eight people surrounding them who were actually working on the side of the experimenter, confederates as we call them. Is there an ethical issue there? The participant believed that they were all real participants like themselves. Ask yourself questions about informed consent. Did the participants actually know what the research was about? Also ask yourself, what was the other I was going to say? So we talked about informed consent, we talked about deception. Also, they might feel a bit embarrassed by the fact that they've done something as foolish as conform over really obvious things. Ask yourself, does that really constitute psychological harm? Do you think they would come out scarred for life as a result of that? You have to make your own decision and mind up about that. Okay, moving on then to alternative evidence. You can use Sheriff and Jenis as two pieces of evidence if you wish, both from the context, and you can actually talk about them as being whether they support or contradict Asch's results. Perrin and Spencer, 1980, did a replication of Asch's research using engineering students, and they found that only one person out of 396 conformed, which we might want to think about why that was the case. I'll just kind of shoot through. Yeah, there were science students who said, I'll shoot through these bits. You need to select 3 or 4 pieces, ideally 4 pieces of alternative evidence. Which one was Nicholson again? Yeah, Nicholson was just a modern replication of Asch by the looks of it. Getting interesting study. See what you think about that. That would could well argue the opposite to what we saw with Perrin and Spencer there. Women were found to be more, given that Asch was all men. Women were found to be more conforming. We might think of reasons why that might be the case. Do women really conform more? Who knows? Running out of time, so all I can say, I've got 5 seconds left, is to say you've got enough alternative evidence there. Go and work hard on this study. See you in class. Goodbye.